Hello and welcome to The Trawl Meets. I'm Marina Purkis.
And I'm Gemma Forte. And on The Trawl Meets, Marina and I get to chat with people we admire and find interesting. We discuss political topics they're passionate about and explore their unique experience of social media.
And today is a Trawl first for a couple of reasons. It's the first Trawl Meets of 2025, and it's the first time we've ever spoken to more than one person in an episode. Because today we are meeting two members of an iconic group. A group who have 160,000 followers on Instagram, 1.2 million subscribers on YouTube, and 1.2 million followers on Facebook.
That's a whole lot of followers.
Yes, it is.
And it's a group who are almost as known for their political leanings as they are for their wonderful music. As The Independent wrote recently, ahead of their sellout Wembley Arena gig and UK tour, theirs was a sound driven by a powerful alchemy of protest and groove, voices of dissent, set to the rolling mid-tempo lope of 1970s reggae.
And the last clue, in case you need it, the band's name is famously a reference to the unemployment benefit form, as each of them had signed it having left school without a job, which at the time was a damning indictment of the Maggie Thatcher government. They are one of the most commercially successful bands of all time, with, worth pointing out, twice as many records sold as Oasis. They are, of course, the wonderful UB40. So please welcome Jimmy Brown and Robin Campbell.
Hello. Hello. What a great introduction. That was
Thank
fun.
you very much. We're coming again now, aren't we?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
And that's it. No. So it's so wonderful to see you today. And we've put a lot of sort of thought into this episode because we're very lucky to have you here, you know, absolute legends. So we thought as we go through the episode as well, we're going to chat about all sorts of things. But sometimes those things might be great and sometimes not so great. So at any point you want to say, I tell you what, that is fantastic and really positive, then perhaps we'll hear this. Divine. And then if there's something that's not so much to your liking, I don't know, maybe a terrible Tory or Donald Trump or something like that, then it's this.
Ooh.
Wine. And we will just use that as and when we feel. But we've got so much to talk about. Now, for anyone listening who isn't completely up to date with the band's history, I'm going to attempt a quick potted history and then we'll get really stuck in. And you guys can correct anything that I've got wrong, of course. So I believe the original starting lineup from 1978 consisted of 8 members, 4 of whom remain in the band to this day. The founding members all met at school in Birmingham, and the first album was Signing Off, and that was recorded in a bedsit. And percussionist Norman Hassan had to record his parts in the garden because his kit was too large to fit through the front door. And then in 1980, the record was released and spent 72 weeks in the album charts. And it remains a stellar debut. And here's actually a clip of you, Robin, being interviewed on The Cutting Edge.
Some of us had got jobs, most hadn't. And those that had got jobs didn't want to do the jobs they were doing. And we wanted to form a band. It was simple as that. We just decided if we were going to, then there'd have to be a kind of total commitment from everybody. And those of us that working gave in the jobs. And we treated it like an apprenticeship, if you like. We spent 6 months, 5 days a week, from 9 or 10 in the morning till 5 at night, learning to play instruments. The same way a typist would, or anything else.
There you go.
Wow. Where'd you get that from?
Cutting Edge, apparently.
Really? Yeah.
We
never
do
even
our
heard of it.
research. Do you know what we do? We trawl
Yeah,
social
we do,
media
yeah.
so you don't have to.
Yeah,
I have been falling down rabbit holes, and oh god, there's so much in your story that I find deeply interesting. But just before that, your succession, the success you found was actually quite quick, relatively
It was
quick.
ridiculously
Yeah,
quick.
Because a certain Chrissie Hynde.
Because of Chrissie, yeah.
From the Pretenders. So tell us about that.
We spent the first year touring, the whole of 79 basically, and I think we did maybe 30 gigs in that year.
Yeah.
And then in our first little mini tour of London, our first visit to London proper, we were playing clubs, with the 101 Club and a few
Porterhouse, Retford, places
Porterhouse,
like that.
Retford, yeah, that wasn't in London though. But we were doing a little
101.
London tour, the 101 Club, yeah. And Chrissie came to one of them.
It was the Rock Garden she came to.
The Rock Garden.
It was a toilet.
And she came backstage and said, "You guys are great. Do you want to come on my tour?"
Wow.
And she had a #1 album and a #1 single at the time, Brass in Pocket. And
She said, "Can we think about it?"
well, the tour, we did actually say that. The tour was sold out already, and she just invited us on. Her management hated the whole idea because anybody else would pay to get on that tour. We hadn't got a penny to our name, so we couldn't pay. And she just said, "I want them."
Do you know what I love about this story as well? Apparently, well, she said she couldn't understand what the fuck you were saying most of the time.
Well, it was
she
funny.
didn't
She always
understand the
thought
Brummy
like she was the
accent.
butt of some joke, is what she said.
And when she came backstage to talk to us for the first time at the Rock Garden, we were having a fight with the security. It was like really all going off. So she must have thought, what a bunch of nutters. We're all a bunch of lads, and so roadies as well, because all the roadies were our mates.
We were a gang. We were a gang.
You were a huge gang
We
as
took
well.
our gang
gang,
on the
yeah.
road, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we met Chrissie. She invited us on the tour, which of course we did. And we then did 30 odd dates in the next 6 weeks, which was more than we'd done in the previous 12 months.
Yeah.
And during that 6 weeks tour of the UK, which, as I say, was a sold out tour anyway, we released our very first single. When we came off the tour, we were #4 in the charts.
Wow.
Wow.
And you did all that, by the way, without a record label. Didn't you?
We had an independent deal.
You created your own.
No, we
hang
signed
on.
a deal with Graduate Records, who were an independent company. And in fact, we had the first hit single without any help, for the first ever, without any help from a major label. So we were independently distributed on an independent label without any major help whatsoever, and we were the first to do that.
What a baptism of fire, though. You know?
It was ridiculous. We actually finished that tour. We had a top 5 single. We were on top of the pops, all looking at each other going, "Can you believe we're doing this?" And then we booked the very same tour
Yeah.
that we'd just done with Chrissie and sold it out.
Wow.
So it
Did it
was
all over again.
ridiculously quick for us. Ridiculous. And then, of course, we released the album that same year, 1980. We were working on the album when we met Chrissie, but we finished it and released it later on in the year. And you said 70-something
Well,
weeks.
I
I
thought
think it was
90
actually 98 weeks.
Oh,
it
was
in the
it?
charts.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
The only
Yeah.
other album at that time that was in the charts longer than us was Bat Out of Hell.
Okay.
Meatloaf.
Yeah.
So it was a massive, massive record for us.
Huge.
A lot of people don't know, when they know us from Red Red Wine, they don't realise that we had a whole career before then. This
Yeah.
is 4 years before.
Yeah.
A lot of bands don't last much longer than 4 years,
So what we love as well is how much you weave politics into your music. So you've got the track 1 in 10, which is the statistic relating to those unemployed, starving, suicidal and homeless. As well as your first single, which was the double A side. So you had Food for Thought, which was all about the hypocrisy. I think this was your quote, Robin. The hypocrisy of Christmas, that there are starving people in Africa, and yet here we are all sat around eating our Christmas dinner and praising the Lord. And the other side of that was the song King, which was an ode to Martin Luther King. And here is...
Not quite an ode to Martin Luther King. The
It was a
subject,
lament.
Yeah, really, because what it was, the song goes, "King, where are your people now?" And what we realised, or what we were trying to put across, was that passive, resistance doesn't work, and it hadn't worked.
Right.
So it's quite a sophisticated song in that way, that we're not going to "how great you are, Martin Luther King," although we do obviously respect what he did, but the idea that you can passively make any kind of difference just doesn't work for us. You've got to fight.
I really like that sentiment as well, because I think you're probably right. You look at the suffragettes; they had to do what they had to do to be
Absolutely.
heard, or any form of resistance. Sadly, often involves some kind of fight.
And because it's the last thing they can do. It's the last resort. Dare I bring in what we've seen in the US and Luigi Mangione shooting a healthcare CEO in the street because people are feeling like
Become a
there's
folk hero, though, hasn't he?
somewhat, and it's
Yes.
creating a lot of debate. But a lot of people are saying the sympathy is coming from a place of there is nothing we could have done within
Pure
the law.
frustration.
Yeah, we've tried. There is nothing we could do. There had to be a violent moment because of this, and this is why there was so much interesting discussion around this. But with regards to your political statements made through your songs, was this intentional? Was there a reason for doing that? Was it important to you to sing about something you cared about?
Yeah,
Well,
we're political people, weren't we?
Exactly. We were political young men who had a lot to shout about. We went to a lot of demonstrations. We were involved in Rock Against Racism, which was massive in the 70s. We used to go down to the South African embassy to protest apartheid, and we were angry young men. So
we were out on the streets when we were out on the streets when the National Front came out.
Absolutely.
It would be, there'd be 150 of them, like there is now. There's never that many. But then you'd have to come out in numbers and just make the streets so hostile they don't want to be there, and you just have to chase them away. That's what you've got to do. You can't just go, oh yeah, okay, let them have freedom of speech. No, you don't let them have freedom of speech.
Big difference, isn't there, between freedom of speech and hate speech?
Yeah, and we were very much involved in protest, and we believed that if you have a platform, if you're in a band and you're writing lyrics, we were young men, so we were not that comfortable writing about love songs anyway. What came easily to us was what we were passionate about, so it made sense for us to use the platform we had, and if we were going to write songs, the odds were that they were going to be political anyway.
I think that's why the songs are so beautiful, and they have that sort of pain within them, that good creativity often comes from a place of anger or a place of pain. And now there's a lot of music which is quite banal and quite sort of manufactured, and they actually probably avoid anything that's controversial or anything that might divide.
I think there always has been. There always has been. When we were listening to pop music in the
Cliff
60s and there's always been the banal side of pop music that don't want to upset anybody and don't want to lose any fans.
But then we've gone through punk. And, there was an atmosphere of youth culture being politicised in that way, certainly anti-racist.
That was a big thing in the
They might have said you were woke. You were woke.
We were woke. We were double woke.
Double woke.
Yeah.
Now, I love this fact, and again, you can correct me if this isn't true. Apparently, your political lyrics landed the band on an MI5 watch list.
Yeah.
What the hell? During the 80s, alongside other acts like John Lennon, Crass, and then the Sex Pistols?
Yeah, as if anybody really cared what they thought about it.
I think that was crazy.
No, but it just goes to show what a fantasy world they live in, these people, that they really thought that we were
some kind of threat.
Threat to, public safety or whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're just a bunch of
Did one of you have your phone tapped?
We all had our phones tapped.
That's insane. And there was a guy that would be like waiting outside.
We built our studios in the early 80s. 82, I think we started building our studios. And we were informed by somebody who worked for the telephone people that we were being tapped and we were being observed. And they had a room in a factory across the road. They had a room where they were taking pictures of everyone who arrived and left, etc. Took down the registration numbers of every car, every visitor. We were under surveillance.
Stoned with your mates.
But, exactly. I was going to say that. That must have been bored listening to us going, Nick, on your weed? Yeah, I got a little bit of weed. Yeah.
Did it not bother you that there was someone watching you?
We thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it was ludicrous. What do they think we're going to do? That we're going to be, storming the the Bastille or whatever.
I wonder if it was under Maggie Thatcher's orders. She didn't like you.
But it was ridiculous. They obviously didn't have a clue what was going on.
I mean, there was a part of the culture at the time, was the Thatcherism, and we were certainly part of that.
They didn't like us much.
They didn't like us at all. We were anti-establishment, and they didn't like it, and they kept their eye on us because of it. But there's nothing new about it. My father was a musician as well, was also a songwriter, was political, was a member of the CND, so he was part of the anti-nuclear thing. And he had his phone tapped as well.
Wow.
A friend of ours who worked for the phone company came and told us, your phone's being tapped. If you listen carefully, when you pick the phone up, you hear a click. And you'll know that the machine has automatically gone on and they're recording your calls. And we used to show people. We used to go, listen to this. pick up the phone and say, you'll hear a click, and it goes tick, and you just hear the whole thing.
Do you know what
start.
I think that is? I think that's red wine.
Oh, Gemma, that's Gemma's touch. You can absolutely tell. Something that just struck me when you were talking there. When you were talking there, Robin, is you said you were anti-establishment, and it just makes me so sad that you actually were. Whereas now we've got these bellends like Richard Tice and fucking Farage pretending they're anti-establishment.
Oh, as if Farage has been on television more times than the Queen. You know, the BBC have created Farage over several decades. You know,
so famously, you are Brummie. You grew up in South Birmingham. Borsal Heath, and it's a part of the city which was full of Jamaicans, which is why you grew up listening to reggae. And then during the 80s, you would have witnessed the rise of the National Front and heard the
70s.
The 70s.
Yeah. Way before your time.
Thank you. And you would have heard the dangerous rhetoric surrounding immigration. So here is a clip from Thames TV. Gemma loves it because it's a bit nostalgic.
Yeah.
It's from 1980 from a programme talking about the danger of the far right in Britain.
Is that rediffusion?
The week before, the British movement held its first national march. The organisers had expected 2,000 demonstrators, but in the event, the police heavily outnumbered the turnout of only 600. And although there were all the familiar trappings, the flags and banners, and there were some menacing figures, the bulk of the marchers were little more than schoolchildren. One man who has over many years traced the varied fortunes of Nazi organisations and sympathisers in Britain is Dr. Jacob Gewurtz.
The Nazis in the 1920s and 1930s built up their power structure precisely with this kind of displaced youth, which had no place to go, which was disgruntled, angry, and they gave them a very powerful means of expression. I can't see it catching on in Britain.
And
it's always been the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every country, disaffected, unhappy youth, you turn them against themselves. People who are similar to them but a different colour or a different religion or a different...
I was going to say that.
What you have to do is learn to hate difference.
Yeah, I was talking about
and then right-wing politics will thrive.
The quote, Aldous Huxley, I think it was, quote about you can... If you can make the herd afraid, then you can manipulate the herd to turn on anybody who isn't part of that herd.
Yeah,
and I think that's
Yeah.
so true. And of course, so you lived through that where everything was very out in terms of the racism. And when I grew up, I kind of was a bit naive because the lid was on it to an extent. It didn't go away. Racism,
but it went underground.
It
was hidden.
Underground. It became
Yeah.
unacceptable.
Unacceptable to have those kind of opinions.
Have those kind of views.
Certainly to put them on the television.
Absolutely.
Whereas now, question time is just raging.
It's a badge of honour
and
now.
so now the lid's been taken off again. And I feel like we've gone backwards, and here we are. So it felt particularly pertinent to be talking to you today because you attended some of those protests against the National Front and so on. Here we are, 2025, last summer. We saw those riots break out all over the UK after those horribly tragic murders in Southport, incited by the likes of Tommy Robinson. So
you know what, and it was the same back in those days. I remember we were going to a demonstration outside Windsor Green Prison in Birmingham. It was against a guy called Robert Ralph, who had put his house up for sale for whites only. And that was against the law to do that. And they put him in prison. Then you had the National Front turning up. This was 77 or somewhere.
Well, they had no whites, no blacks, no Irish, didn't they?
Well, it was after that. It was 77. I mean, we're talking the 60s. The 60s when people wanted to live in digs where they'd say no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. But later on, it was against the law to say you can only sell your house to whites. So anyway, they put him in Windsor Green Jail. And then a handful of National Front turned up, and then probably there was about 100, 200 at the most, but then about 4,000 anti-racist demonstrators turn up, and it's exactly the same today. There are not very many of them,
Okay, so I think,
but they have a very loud voice.
And also we've got the issue now where you've got Tommy Robinson, who is being backed now by the richest
Elon
man
Musk,
in
yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
And this is the thing. So when you say it's exactly the same, I actually think we're in a more dangerous spot. And especially when we've just learnt this week that Facebook is going to stop its fact checking. We're going to have 4 years essentially of right-wing propaganda, disinformation, misinformation, absolutely just a tidal wave of it. And then the likes of Tommy Robinson mobilised in a way that the funding, clearly Elon Musk would like him to be the leader of reform. Prime Minister, his dad's going around saying that. Don't do ketamine, kids. Yeah.
So, and also there's another great quote when they say that the old ways are dying and the new ways are yet to be born. Now's the time of monsters. And I think that's where we are in this particular period of time, is that there's a decline. Trump as president, it's a sign of decline,
But Oswald Mosley was a sign of decline, and Hitler was a sign of decline. But they gain power if it's successful enough. It's all propaganda. If the propaganda works well enough, then
populism,
the growth happens.
But the thing is, propaganda,
and it becomes normalised.
Absolutely, but we're now living in a digital age where propaganda is on steroids.
Yeah.
So if you are doing that, which the right are very good at that, they are very good at pumping out bite-sized chunks of information, popular stuff that is very, we talked about cultivating fear and how that leads to this kind of disenfranchising of young men, especially. This is what they are now capitalising on. They are very good at it.
Yeah, but that's a sign of decline.
Yeah.
That's a sign that, people have got no direction. And
because of what? And why do we have that? Because of growing inequality?
Personally, yeah. And I think that there was a new starting gun fired in class war in the very early 80s with the deregulation of global finance and the introduction of neoliberal finance and the financialisation of every part of our lives, that really in the end, the rich have become massively richer, whereas the normal workers have seen their incomes flatline or even go backwards, So I think that
last gone backwards 40, from the 80s.
45, exactly, from the early 80s. The big bang deregulation that Thatcher introduced because she was influenced by Reagan in America, and Reagan was influenced by the neoliberal intellectuals in the colleges at that time, and the whole edifice, because that's when they created the shadow banking system, and that shadow banking system, or derivatives market, suddenly in a space of a couple of years became worth more than 100 years of the normal market, and it just shows you that really since then almost all the global growth has been built on debt.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's where we are,
And you get to the point where Musk is omnipotent. What consequences is he ever going to face with that kind of money? And there he is.
Not a happy chap, though, is
Well,
it?
clearly
Desperately,
not.
desperately.
Do you know what? He needs a hobby, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
He just
he
needs
does.
something to
Fucking
do.
waste of a billionaire. If that were me, I'd be having the best time of my life.
Yeah, and you could change the world.
And I'd say this. I would open hospitals.
Yeah.
I would do all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah.
He could
you know
rid
what?
the third world of
Imagine being
hunger.
able to knock
He
on
could end
people's
starvation. He could
doors.
end homelessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could have that wonderful, it's a selfish thing, isn't it, when you're being kind for yourself. But I think it'd be really fun to be like a sort of Father Christmas type
Yeah, but
person, where you just go around and you knock on the door and you go, hey, you had a terrible time last week. Here's a new car.
But
like
we are
a game show
we're
hostess.
genetically programmed to be altruistic. You get all kinds of, your brain gets all kinds of chemicals telling you how great things are.
Maybe the ketamine's a blocker.
Yeah,
Maybe it
possibly,
stops
quite
the-
possibly. Makes them
stops the
turn you into an
altruistic.
asshole. Yeah, yeah. Most drugs do, apart from weed.
But the thing is, because of your youth, you're seeing this as worse than it's ever been before.
Yeah.
But if you lived in the 30s, a century ago,
Like Rob did.
it's hilarious. Then you would think that this was nothing compared to then.
Yes. We're not having to hide in an attic.
And in our
Yeah.
youth, I remember in the 60s talking about no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Used to get those in the windows of bed sits and stuff. But I also remember an advert, a Tory party advert, saying if you want a coloured for a neighbour, vote Labour.
That was their
That was an
promotional
acceptable advert for them to use.
I can see generic putting something out
No,
similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, so really nothing
Yes.
has changed. It's just cyclical. It comes back all the time. As things get worse for people, they look for someone to blame. And that's when right-wing people use it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
here's
to
a
their
question then.
advantage.
And by the way, thank you for saying that I'm young. So I'm gonna
Well, you're younger than us.
Believe
No,
me.
wait a minute.
Don't roll
Wait
back
a
on
minute.
it.
No, that's Red Divine. Sophie, it's Red
Go
Divine.
on, go for it.
Divine. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, so do you think then? So I was looking, Kemi Badenoch and Starmer in PMQs yesterday.
Jesus.
Essentially, I know. Essentially, Labour want to put through this bill, safeguards kids from being taken out of school and abused, right? And the Conservatives are trying to block it and all this. And I thought, I think that there was a time where the opposition picked their battles a little more and did actually, and I think even Starmer and his Labour Party in opposition, I know, but I think when there was something that was clearly for the common good, they would pick their battles more. Don't you think? Or am I being crazy?
I think Starmer's dreadful.
No, I know. And we are going to get onto a section,
all right, go on.
about him. But I just think, is that something that's got worse, in your opinion? So in opposition to
playing
Thatcher,
politics.
yeah, that playing politics, that sort of absolute scrapping, that absolute savagery.
I think the quality of politicians has definitely gone down over the decades. I think that when you look at some of the, big people in the past, they're so much better educated, so much more powerful
More
people,
polite.
powerful speakers. When you look at Tony Benn, for instance, the quality of the politicians
but
then.
in his in his time,
he was
ridiculed and laughed at by the media, by the right wing. He was made a laughing stock of and became a joke, just as Corbyn was.
Yeah.
They just told enough lies about him until he was no longer electable.
But I also
he was no longer able to lead the Labour Party because he was, a terrorist-loving anti-Semite. None of which
But then
is
again,
true.
that just speaks to how absolutely fucked the landscape is, not just in terms of the standard of our politicians, but our media landscape.
That's what
which
I'm
is
saying, the media.
increasingly
But it's always
being
been-
bought up.
But it's
by
always
the right
been the
wing.
same. The
well,
billionaires
Even
have
the
always
Guardian,
owned
even the Guardian,
media.
Robin. The Guardian, Robin, is now being taken over by
Yeah, it's dreadful.
Tortoise,
Yeah,
which
dreadful.
is right leaning.
Yeah.
So we're in Twitter, Facebook, Meta, Instagram, Threads. Jesus.
Hey,
Well,
you know what it is? It's red wine. Wine. Right, we're going to get back to politics because we love it, all political vultures sitting here. But we also want to talk about something else. And we know you've probably talked about it to death, but we have to mention the fact that at a certain point, Ali Campbell, your brother, left the band, right? So here is a clip from the Today programme in Australia.
And after a string of hit singles and albums and sellout shows around the world, they're headlining the Ragamuffin Reggae shows in Australasia and facing a massive challenge with one of their founding members deciding it's time to sign off.
We're very disappointed and quite sad about the fact that this may be the last show with Ali. But, UB40 will continue and will go on. And we're not quite sure in what guise yet, but we have nothing but good wishes for Ali.
A massive gap. That
Big
was.
old pause. Big old pause there,
You
Robin.
pinched yourself.
I was
didn't you, when
trying
you said
to find a way of saying it nicely.
I think you did it. I think you did very well in that statement because, okay, I'm going to be honest. I didn't know as much about the band as I know now. I've been absolutely falling down rabbit holes and I find it fascinating. I actually feel a bit nervous even meeting you today after watching it because I didn't realise quite how iconic you were. And also, I felt like quite sad. I felt like after watching a documentary, I know it's from 2016, is it Promises and Lies? Named after your album.
Yeah, mostly lies.
which
Some
talked
lies.
about the incredible sort of rise you had, and then how it all just fell apart. And I felt really moved and really sad watching it because what we've seen is it was a family band. It was a group of lads. You were a proper band. You believed in it. You had a laugh, and you were having this incredible journey, arenas, worldwide tours. And then the bit that just got me in the gut was when it said at one point you returned back from one tour and there was no money. It'd all gone.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, part of that was the music business and the declining record sales, because what was happening was there was less and less records being sold with the rise of technology.
Streaming,
And we were having to tighten our belts anyway. But I mean, you know, we were still doing really great. You know, we were doing arena tours, we were selling records, but not so many. So we had to tighten our belt. And at the time, Ali got himself a new squeeze, new girlfriend, you know, and rejected his family. And he was trying to impress her by doing, but it was like Mike Tyson in a jewelry shop, you know, he was trying to, and we were saying, you need to rein this in, you know, you need to tighten your belt. Like, we're going to have to tighten our belts, you know, because there isn't as much money in the business.
Did they last, or did she bugger off with the jewellery?
Well,
no, they're still together.
yeah.
It's just
well, I think he
investment then.
I think he made the calculation, you know, encouraged by his girlfriend and our ex-manager, and made the calculation that maybe if he was to dump the band, then he could go out and still live the same pop star life he'd been used to living for 20 years or whatever it was. And I think that was the calculation he made. Unfortunately, the tour that he booked at that time under his own name just bummed. You know, he was selling 200 tickets in a 10,000
Because
arena.
he was going as Ali Campbell, not
exactly.
UB40.
Not UB40, yeah. He went out as Ali Campbell.
He spent nearly 5 years as Ali Campbell.
The voice of the legendary
voice of,
yeah,
etc.
different ways of billing himself.
Yeah, and was spectacularly unsuccessful.
I think what made me feel sad is that when you fall out with a family member, which I never have, but I have fallen out with I had some school friends, and at a certain point our relationship broke down. And it's fine now, but I remember it got to a point where you just couldn't fix it.
Too much
It
water
just went,
under the bridge.
too much been said, too much had happened, it's done. And that's actually the best point to get to, because you just stop caring, or you don't want to fix it anymore. You've sort of run out of steam. But they were friends from school, and you know, for you particularly, that's your brother. That's gotta hurt.
Again, I've said this so many times, but it wasn't a family fallout. It wasn't brothers falling out. He left the band, and he was also closer to several members of the band than he was to me. Even though he was my kid brother, we were always close. But for instance, Brian Travers, our sax player who's passed away, they were best pals from the age of 10, 11 years old when they started secondary school together and found each other and were inseparable for years, you know.
Also, his relationship with Duncan, who's your younger brother, who actually then stepped in to basically stepped in to fill Ali's shoes.
And my
they
other
were really
brother,
close.
my oldest brother, David, he hasn't spoken to any of us since he left. Not one word.
But it was funny, you
but
know,
neither has he spoken to any other member of the band.
Either, yeah. Or his family. You know,
or his family.
Yeah.
He's just
So
walked
deeply
out
sad.
of that life into another one and dropped everybody.
It also really, he didn't make it to your dad's funeral.
Or his mum's.
Or his mum's, yeah.
Wow.
No,
That's
He
heartbreaking.
didn't come to either parents' funerals and
Heartbreaking.
gave some excuse as to why he couldn't make it. You know.
That is sad.
He pretended he was in Australia or New Zealand one of the times, when I know that he wasn't, because I know when he flew back. But he said, you know, I won't be able to come because I'm in New Zealand or whatever. And then he didn't come to my mum's funeral at all, and never even gave an excuse or anything, just didn't come.
So sad. I know that in the documentary it said that your dad had sided more with you, but your mum didn't take any sides. You were all her boys and she just wanted you to...
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because his
Yeah,
mum was lovely.
Yeah. Mum didn't want to take sides with anybody because she loved us all equally, etc. My dad was just really disappointed that he'd chosen to go solo when, you know, the whole ethos of the band was that we were a gang of brothers, you know, that we did everything equally, we shared everything equally.
Socialist.
Exactly,
Still
totally
do, yeah.
socialist. And that was, without any doubt, that was greatly influenced on my side by my father. You know, and the advice he gave me when we formed the band, about sharing everything equally, about, you know, not having some songwriters, but everything's written by 8 members of the band, even though only 1 or 2 members of the band wrote the song. Then, you know, that was massively influenced by my dad's politics, massively. Our whole ethos was, and Ali was influenced in the same way, and for him to turn his back on that whole idea
He went capitalist.
was just ridiculous.
But that's the thing about being in a band and about being friends from school is that once, it keeps your feet on the ground, because once somebody starts acting in a way like a pop star, somebody's going to go, well, you're acting like that for you, Pratt. Do you know what I mean? Somebody will bring you down, keep your feet on the ground. Like we've all got families, I've been with my wife since before the band, so we've been together nearly 50 years, you know what I mean? But that keeps your feet on the ground. And I think the problem with Ali was that he didn't want to be told that he's not a pop star. He didn't like being brought down, didn't like having his feet kept on the ground. He wanted to play that pop star role, and he hated being...
And he found a new circle
they all told him he was
friends
great.
and family that were all telling him that he was the reason the band existed, and that he could go on his own and he didn't need the rest of us.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I have no problem with saying that without Ali's special voice, we would never have got where we did. When you look at other bands like the Specials or Mad, they haven't got singers. Whereas Ali was a particularly great singer, and I'm sure that we would never have got where we were without it. But...
And I only wanted to be in a band because I wanted to sing with Ali, because I knew how good he was, It still doesn't change the fact that it wasn't his band. Yeah. He didn't start it. We all did.
And he didn't do the work. He didn't spend all the time. He was too busy drinking. He had a drink problem most of his
didn't write lyrics.
So the last thing I read up on was that you were suing him because he was going under the name UB40.
We were trying to stop him using the UB40
Where did that
name.
get to?
We got to the point.
Very expensive.
It got very expensive, and like you were saying about Friends, it comes to a point where you just give up. You just say it's not worth fixing. Yeah. So we just got to a point where we just, this isn't worth fighting over. This isn't worth constant court cases. So let's just call it a day.
See, there's a hopeless romantic in me.
Let him do what he wants.
I know you're going to say there's no over my dead body, right? But there's still a bit of me goes, maybe one day. And then I look at the way.
Over our dead body.
But was there not a little tiny 1% of you when the Gallagher brothers were like, they're set to make 50 million quid each from a reunion, and we know they didn't sell as many records as you. They weren't as successful. Like, if you did, just agree to disagree.
All the money in the world wouldn't get us.
See, this because you're principled. You're
Absolutely,
principled.
and we've stuck to them all our lives.
See, it's gone too far,
Yeah, but also, the conclusion I've come to in the end is that he's done us a big favour. We've got a brilliant singer. He's only 30. He's got a fantastic voice, and we can rely on him, and he doesn't get boozed up every night, and we're having the best time we've ever had live, and making records as well.
Your album last year got to number 10 in the charts.
Number
5.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Number 5.
We also had a number one single on the
charts.
download charts as well.
Wow.
Amazing.
The thing is, we think that the band in its current state is the best band we've been for 30 years,
Yeah.
We honestly are delighted with how the reception we're getting, the fans, the way they treat us, the way they've accepted the new members, because it's not just our lead singer, we've got a new keyboard player.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Exactly, and you've seen the atmosphere, you've seen how they're totally accepted as members of the band, and the sound we're making, we think, is stronger than it's been for a long, long time.
And it wouldn't be as good if he was still with us.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And going back to that thing where you need people who can talk to you and ground you, I arrived today at the studio and Marina told me I had soup on my face.
Yeah, really? Yeah.
And
you need somebody today, don't you?
Yeah, I think you do. Now, so thank you for sharing all of that with us. Now, you're passionate lefties. And you even made it onto Newsnight, actually, for endorsing Jeremy Corbyn. Here's a clip.
Today, Jeremy Corbyn was endorsed by an iconic band, which was the scourge of Thatcherites.
Your band, formed in the late 1970s during a time of increasing youth unemployment, then went on to become this iconic name, UB40.
But critics couldn't resist saying that winning the endorsement of a bunch of ageing rockers may show how Jeremy Corbyn's worldview hasn't changed in 3 decades, a view vehemently rejected by UB40.
Really, in the end, what we proved is we were absolutely right to be complaining about what they were doing during the Thatcher period, because they were deregulating the banks, they were selling off houses, and that, and those are the problems that we're dealing with now. We were right what we said then, and we're right now. It's obvious. I think that was me who said that.
It was, yeah, it was.
Yeah, well, I fully believe it. I mean, we've been complaining for many, many years, and like you say, things haven't changed. But I think what's happened is that it's confirmed, really, that though a lot of what's going on now has its roots in that Thatcher period. Housing. Look at the mess that housing is in, and they sold off all the council houses, and
you can't blame people for buying them, because it gave them a chance to get on the house owning ladder for half of the price. Yeah. So of course you can't blame people for doing it, but that whole idea won her votes and destroyed council housing, because there isn't any now. There is no social housing left.
Yeah. But I think no political party will do anything about it, because really the British housing market is a free for all for drug cartels, oligarchs, who are buying up expensive properties, not even living in them. But as long as you keep up that value, and the value of it keeps growing,
and investors
people's pensions aren't worth anything.
Investors who buy those HMOs and then they stuff them full. There's they'll carve it into 10 rooms and then put immigrants in there or whatever.
People pay 400-500 quid for a room.
Yeah.
And more than that in London, obviously.
Back to Corbyn.
Go on.
How do you feel about him now? Do you feel a bit let down by him at all? Or?
He was
not vaguely let down. No. I think he was a man who was stabbed in the back by his own party, by Starmer and his cronies. As I had a surprise birthday party thrown by my wife last week, because I had a big birthday, and I'm not saying what it was. But guess who was a surprise guest at the party? Jeremy. Jeremy and his lovely wife Laura turned up, and
he's a beautiful man.
He's a wonderful man.
Yeah. So we struggled with him not being stronger on Brexit at the time, because that election, the 2019
election... I completely disagree with that, because don't forget that there were, what you had was two sides. You had one side that said all our problems are caused by the EU, and the other side was saying all our solutions are in the EU, and whereas Corbyn was in the middle, he knew that the problems with the EU, it wasn't democratic. You couldn't support your own industries, which means you couldn't support your own working class, because you couldn't allow subsidised products to go into the market. And there were various things that made the ECB was insisting, the European Central Bank was insisting that when you put any kind of private, any kind of public good, public sovereign good up for tender, you had to include the private.
So there's a lot of nuance there that I would agree with, but it's a bit like you're either pregnant or you're not, and that whole election, if you cast your mind back, was tribal, and you were either in the EU or you were out, and there wasn't room for any of that greyness. Not with Johnson.
I agree.
Who was,
I've just got to get in here, because this is my bête noire. Is that what happened on the night of 2019 was 50 of the 56 seats that Labour lost that night were in leave voting ex-Labour constituencies in the North East and on the East Coast. That's what happened. And who was in charge of the policy of ignoring the democratic will of those people that had voted leave? Keir Starmer. He was the one that was in control, and he grandstanded at conference to make sure that the policy that Labour were fighting in 2019 was to rerun the referendum. And nobody wanted to do that. Nobody wanted that. In a country that was completely exhausted by, by Europe, nobody wanted to hear the word again. To run that election with that policy was suicidal. Jeremy Corbyn didn't want that. He wanted to honour the result, because he's a Democrat, and it was a democratic decision to leave the EU. And I don't think it was right for the for Starmer, for instance, to be at the front of the People's Vote rallies. He's not so happy to stand side by side with the workers on a picket line, but he's very happy to stand at the front of that demonstration, which to me was anti-democratic, and that's why we lost. And I think Starmer knew that, and I think it was a way of getting rid of Jeremy Corbyn.
Do you know what's really making me laugh? On our running order, it says, coming up after the break, we'll ask the guys what they think of the current Labour incarnation. Okay, carrying on, because this is so juicy. Like, I am going to take from this, you are not keen on the current incarceration of...
Incarnation.
Incarceration.
Incarceration
would be an improvement.
That's a Freudian slip, isn't it?
Nice incarnation of Labour. In fact, you think they're red wine. Red wine. Yeah.
Yeah, they drive me mad. These middle class Labour MPs with their PPE from university, and they all think the same way, and they really would be they're Lib Dems really, and probably One Nation Tories. They're all the same, they're technocrats.
Oh, you've just triggered me there, Jimmy. I hate it when people say they're all the same, because they're not all the same.
Of course they're not.
No, they're not. What I'm saying is that those particular right-wingers of Labour, who were dreadful people. I agree with Alexis Sale when he said, I've met a lot of left-wing Labour people and they're lovely people, they just want a better world. Mm-hmm. But the right wing of Labour are some of the most dreadful people he's ever met, and really just dreadful people. And that's what they're like,
So how did you feel at the last election? Because we were delighted that the Tories were gone.
I didn't vote for Labour.
We were delighted. We voted tactically.
We also. I didn't vote for Labour either.
No.
I voted
First
Lib
time in
Dem.
my life I didn't vote for Labour.
I would have voted for anybody though. I would have voted Labour, Tinky Winky, Dean Gaffney, Judith Chalmers, literally anybody to get.
I'd have voted Judith Chalmers though.
Judith Chalmers, Richard Madeley. Yeah. I mean, anyone to get the Tories out. That was how I felt. I just couldn't.
That was happening anyway, though. That was happening anyway. It was written in the stars, But the trouble is, and I have to say this as well, this is another one of my bet noirs, is that these...
How many bet noirs you got?
I've got loads. But these MPs, Labour MPs, they're crowing about having this massive majority, built on nothing, by the way.
Less votes than Corbyn got.
Anybody, less votes than Corbyn got in 2019.
Yeah.
Don't forget about 2017. But and they did exactly the same when Blair became Prime Minister, because it was already the Tories were going to lose when John Smith was in charge of Labour. John Smith had a heart attack, but Labour were miles ahead. That's why Murdoch turned to Labour back then and did it this time, because they knew they were going to win. Everybody knew they were going to win, and they're trying to congratulate themselves. But if Mickey Mouse was in charge of the party, they would have won.
I don't think anybody really knew what they were going to do or what they
didn't care.
They
just wanted the Tories out.
They got in. For me personally, my biggest disappointment is the stance on Gaza. On Palestine.
Oh, dreadful.
I just can't bear it. I can't bear it.
Yeah, that's why they deserve to lose in America as well.
Heartbreaking.
Kamala Harris deserved to lose. Yeah. Because of that.
Not that it's going to be better with Trump.
No, of course
that is why I think she hemorrhaged an awful lot of support as well.
But you'd think it might be better with the Labour Party, wouldn't you? Who had a tradition of celebrating Palestinian. They used to run the flag at, Labour councils used to have the Palestinian flag flying, Years ago when we first started, they used to do that.
There must be one aspect of them being in that we can find a red divine, because I want to play that one as well. So what, for instance, what about VAT on private school fees? Does that get your socialist hearts
that
going?
was great. That was fine.
Red divine. Divine.
What about another one?
Go on.
What about the inheritance tax reform for farmers?
Yeah, I must admit that I lack a little bit of sympathy for the farmers.
Jimmy, is it divine or is it wine?
Divine.
Divine.
I'm not 100% on that, to be honest. But there you go. Go on, carry on. Any more?
Winter fuel allowance being taken away from pensioners.
That's
We're going to go wine.
Definitely wine.
Don't even save that much money.
No.
Last one, Musk's position on Jess Phillips.
Well, I never liked Jess Phillips. She was never good to Corbyn. But I have to admit, I'm on her side, with this. So, yeah, I mean, Musk is just out of control.
Yeah.
He's a ketamine freak.
Yeah,
isn't he?
we think that it doesn't matter what your political flavour is.
He's turned
when it
on
comes
Farage
to...
because he won't support Tommy Robinson.
I know.
How ridiculous.
I know, the Overton window it's actually disappeared. It's so right.
So one thing I want to ask, because this also made me a little bit sad. Sorry, lots of sadness here, but I just need to get to the bottom of it. So when you were younger, you sung about political things, and now I know there's a quote from you which was I think it's from you, Robin. You said, we used to think we could change the world. 40 years on, it dawns on you that it makes no difference whatsoever. All we're doing is preaching to the choir. And then I look at your latest album and all your new songs, not that I can see, they're all about love and sort of,
They're not.
And they are, but they're not political.
Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, maybe I've got this all wrong then.
Well,
Home is an anti-racist song. Jimmy's song,
Fool Me Once,
is aimed at people who voted for Trump or voted for Boris Johnson.
Disguised as a love song.
I am very happy to hear this and be put wrong here, because I thought it sounded like you'd become despondent and you weren't bothering anymore.
People often say, it makes me laugh, people often say, oh, they just became a covers band, because of the success of tunes like Red, Red Wine. But we've never stopped being a political band. We've never stopped writing our own songs. We've done 20-odd albums of our own original material.
And four albums.
4 Labour of Love albums.
Okay, so it's still in your art and it's still in your soul, of course. But this quote is interesting. You've said all we're doing is preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I do believe that.
It dawns on you that it makes no difference whatsoever.
I think when you're angry young men, I think you do believe you can change the world. I think that's why young men are as passionate and as involved in protest as they are, or young people, not young men. But, as young men, we were very passionate about what we were angry about, you know, and we really did believe we were going to change the world for a very short time, because you realise that in actual fact, many of your predecessors have been doing the same thing, have been saying the same stuff, and all. It really doesn't make a lot of difference.
And going back to what we were talking about racism, about how it became unacceptable in the late 90s and the noughties, became unacceptable to be overtly racist in public, But what happened was it gets passed on in families. That's how it works. If you're born into a family that's casually racist,
you're taught racism.
You're going to be grown up that way,
Absolutely.
It's a prison.
Can I suggest for your next track, maybe it's something to do with like telling billionaires to go fuck themselves? I think
we did that with Trump. Remember Earl's tune, Trumpy Trumpy?
Yeah, Trumpy Trumpy, yeah.
Oh, I need to look that up.
With his comb over, yeah. He really did lay into him, yeah. We did it in America as well, and it was like a double thing with Gilly, our rapper, and he used to wear a Trump mask and come on, has gone, how do you like me now,
So they haven't booked you for Trump's inauguration then?
Also, if you need some activist backing singers who can't really sing, we're available.
I can do some.
We can do a bit of a troll dance there. Right.
You ladies can come on stage with us anytime you like.
Wow, amazing. Honestly, you're going to regret saying that. I can't do the can. Troll t-shirts.
Don't do that though when you.
All right.
Okay.
Oh God, I've already been cancelled.
Yeah.
I can't wait to that song. Right. Okay. Are you fans of any Tories?
No.
Who?
That was such a quick question.
Really?
Are your fans? Do you have? Are your fans?
Tory fans?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
The ones that are always coming on saying, why don't you just leave politics out of it, guys, and stick to what you do best? Just stick to the music and leave politics out of it.
What do you say to
I've
them?
been a fan for years, but after you supported Corbyn, that's it, I'm not buying another record.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't a fan beforehand, were you, really?
Yeah.
You liked a couple of tunes.
Yeah, and also don't worry, be all right. It's like when people tell me I am unfollowing you because I don't like your views. I'm like,
bye-bye.
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for it, Mr. Gimp Face with 3 followers. Do what you like. Couldn't give a shit. Stick it up your ass.
There's somebody doing that every time you guys post.
Yeah.
You get a, I'm unfriending you, I'm unfollowing you. And
I tell you what happens to me on Instagram. I'll post a nice sort of picture showing off looking nice in a dress or something like that, and I get like a little influx of new followers. And then they find out I've got opinions. And then I'll lose a load again.
Yeah. Oh, you got that one guy sent you a video of him stroking the bishop.
Oh, dear, really?
Yes.
Only one?
No, or I get, I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed because I've sort of said something that I think, I'm like, okay, like, bye.
We get that personally all the time. I get personal messages from people saying, I can't believe you said that about whatever, and I just think, well, you don't know me then. If you can't believe I said that, then go away.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Go somewhere else, please.
Right, on the trawl, we like to do underrated tweets of the week. So we found a couple. We've got one each. So mine is from Mary Hunter, who said, I'm not totally against a memorial to Thatcher. I'm just not sure what form it should take. An abandoned coal mine, a giant UB40, a mothballed steep yard, or simply an empty bottle of milk.
It's lovely to be part of that, you know, to have our name mentioned in something like that.
Yeah. This is it's literally from an account called The Dad Joke Man. It's such a dad joke. I went to see a UB40 tribute act called WD40 last night. They were a bit rusty at first, but got better as the evening went on. Red wine.
Red wine. And before we wrap up, let's talk about social media just briefly. You've got massive platforms on YouTube, huge platforms. Do you do any of your own social media? I'm thinking you don't, Jimmy, because when you arrived, you said you barely look at your mobile. Or you don't have a mobile?
No, well,
he's constantly on Facebook.
On Facebook.
I'm big on Facebook.
But my problem is that I started off with 5,000-6,000 followers, and then I got thrown off for saying something like "I hate Thatcher" or whatever.
You can say anything now, Jimmy. You'll
well,
be fine.
And then I opened another one and got 5,000 or whatever. Then I got thrown off that one, and in the end I just got sick of. But I'm still on Facebook, and I do have, but it's all about politics. I don't do anything personal on Facebook. You know what I mean?
You don't take pictures of your food and upload.
No, never do anything like that. It's always about politics.
So when you became hugely famous, it didn't exist. It was just charts, top of the pops, word of mouth, and quite sort of refreshing, really. But now it's quite a necessary commercial
for sure.
Thing. And so do you sort of embrace that, Robin?
Well, we have to, really. My son, Matt, came on board in the first place to run our social media because nobody was. We weren't doing it. So, and he came to me as a young man involved in social media himself. He just said, Dad, you've got to be doing something here. You're missing a massive opportunity. And he kind of took over that. And eventually, of course, he's taken over the management of the band, him and his partner.
Right.
But they do our social media, and they're forever trying to get us involved. We do stuff all the time.
He made you come and do this, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For which we're very grateful.
I don't think he also wants to control it as well, because he doesn't want it to get it too cluttered. If every member of the band was contributing to our Facebook page or YouTube or whatever, it would just become really cluttered.
Yeah, you don't want Norman posting when he's pissed.
No, absolutely, yeah. Or me when I'm on ketamine like Elon Musk.
Well, I tell you what, it has been such a treat to talk to you today. Yeah, afraid so. Our listeners are busy people, But I mean, they know where to find you, listen to their music, look them up, be glad that they're still being political and wonderful and outspoken. We wouldn't have it any other way. And if I'm speaking to a UB40 fan, hello, welcome to the trawl. What do you think, Marina?
Yeah, and look out for us on the next tour. We'll be the backing dancers.
Yes, although apparently
God,
my
I wish I'd never
dancing
said that.
I'm going to have a few lessons before. So before we go to our pudding, I'm just going to say it has been this to talk to you. Wrong one. Red. Yeah. Divine. Naughty Sophie's laughing there. It really has been divine. But now Marina and I will leave you with pudding. It's the cherry on the top. So this is a lovely moment from Bob Marley, who spent time in Birmingham, I believe, and was a huge influence on your band, of course, a reggae great.
Have you made a lot of money out of your music?
Money? I mean, how much is a lot of money to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Have you made, say, millions of dollars?
No.
Are you a rich man?
When you mean rich, what do you mean?
Do you have a lot of possessions? A lot of money in the bank?
Possession make you rich? I don't have that type of richness. My richness is life, forever.